Hey everybody. Whoa. Is this thing loud for you guys too? Yeah? Okay. So first off, I want to thank Jerome and all the people over here organizing this. This is a really awesome event, so let's give them like major props. Thank you guys. So my name is Griff Green, and I am co-founder of the White Hat Group, and obviously I'm co-founder of Giveth, which is what I'm going to present today. In 2016, I worked on this crazy project called the DAO that may have ruined it for everybody, but sorry about that. But it's kind of set an interesting stage for smart contract security, where people are really worried about going too far on the decentralization spectrum, and it kind of made an excuse for all the ICOs to just start, putting all their money in multi-sigs and not having any accountability. So the White Hat Group kind of saw this coming, and we weren't very excited about the path that it was headed. So we started a project called Giveth. It kind of came out of the seeds of the DAO. Let's move this thing. We're a little behind. And so out of the ashes of the DAO came Giveth, and we started Giveth to really focus on building projects for building the DNA that we need for decentralized governance. The DAO kind of put everybody on the step back. But still, people don't understand what Giveth is, right? I get asked all the time, what the hell is Giveth? And it's hard to describe sometimes to people because it's a new thing. It's not an ICO, it's not a foundation, it's not a company, it's really just its own community, right? Giveth is a community centered around blockchain for good. So the original goal of Giveth was just to be a project for decentralized governance. We learned a lot of lessons from the DAO. The big one, which I already kind of talked about, is starting out with centralized security features, because we're not in the space where we can just go full-on decentral right away and just hope that it's all going to work out. So it's really important to bake in escape hatches, whitelists, upgradability, time delays, owners. All of these things are really cool and important to start off with when you're starting your projects, but it's okay to do if you bake in a path towards decentralization when you start, right? So like the escape hatch is totally centralizing, right? Somebody can just click a button and take the money, but you can zero out that escape hatch caller later and it's gone. It's just a safety net, right? So we created, can you go back to the mini-me stuff? So we created a couple smart contracts, the mini-me, the vault, and a bunch of others that we used so that we could ourselves be a DAO. And it's called, we take this process that we call dog fooding. It's pretty popular in software design, right? It's like you don't want to, if you've had to eat your dog's food, it would probably taste a lot better, right? So that's how we live, right? And it's not easy at all. It's hard to be a blockchain-based entity, but that helps us build it for everybody else, which is kind of the goal of Giveth. The White Hat Group is a kind-hearted, practical bunch, and we didn't really feel like we needed a whole lot of money to get this project going. So we decided to build Giveth in the form of decentralizing nonprofits, because investors are great because they give you a bunch of money, and that's cool, right? But they also suck because they gave you a bunch of money, and it's really hard to work with them sometimes. So it was just easier to stay out of that realm and build the tools that we want to see. And the charity space is ripe for decentralization. It's a great place to experiment because it's low risk. And so we just started building stuff. And as the community grew, we actually started bringing in people from the normal nonprofit space. And they gave us a lot of perspective and actually influenced the community as we started building. And we started actually focusing less on governance, especially since Argonne has that covered for us pretty well. And so the colony and these other projects. And really started focusing on something that there's nothing else in the space really doing, building things for nonprofits. So, except for Alice right here. They're doing a great job too. We became the first decentralized altruistic communities. Decentralized altruistic community is a community focused on a goal one concrete goal, like I'll talk about helping the homeless in Paris in a second, with a blockchain-based infrastructure. And what's really cool about this infrastructure is that it's open source, and the way we're designing it is to be extremely inviting, right? It's not just, oh yeah, here's our code, walk away. It's like document it as much as possible and be as transparent as possible, which is where our DAP really comes in. So you can see how donations flow throughout the community. And trying to build, communities don't have a hierarchical structure, which is also a very difficult problem to solve. How do you organize without a boss? So we're practicing that as well. The Giveth's goal, though, is to be the engine for DACs, to pump out as many DACs as possible and to make it easy for people to be efficient within these communities and share resources amongst each other. So our flagship product is the DAP. The Giveth DAP, which Wojtek, RJ, Sasha, and all these guys are working on so hard. It's pretty complicated to explain, I'll be honest. So we're going to head over to the imagination station, and I'm just going to read a story, okay? This story is about Manu. Manu is a sweetheart, right? She has volunteered with homeless organizations here in Paris in the past, but it always kind of felt ineffective. She personally felt like she was just easing symptoms of homelessness and that there were better ways to help, but she didn't really know what they were. Now fast forward to today, she just hit it big with an early Ether investment, and she's really excited about using her profits to help people sleeping in the streets here in Paris. But she doesn't just want to turn the Ether into euros and then send it to a charity and then kind of just hope that something good happens with it. She knows that these organizations are doing their best, but they haven't really been focusing on the core root of the problems, in her opinion. She wants to be more involved with what the money is spent on, and she wants to keep it as Ether as long as possible. So she hears about Giveth and decides to try to build a community to help her end homelessness in Paris. And Giveth works great for her because she has a bunch of Ether to give. She goes to our DAP's webpage and answers a few questions, and boom. In a few minutes, she has built Sleep Safely in Paris DAC, right? Decentralized Altruistic Community. Or the SIP DAC, which is much easier to say. The SIP DAC is a fully functional, blockchain-based, nonprofit community with a transparent accounting system and a Riot chat room right out of the gate. Just after a few questions, it's good to go. Like all the tools to build a community. This community can receive funds and then funnel them to projects that help homeless people in Paris. She seeds it with her own funds to get started, and then looks for cool projects to support in other DACs that have already built themselves up, while her community grows. Eventually, the community does grow, and other people start to donate to the SIP DAC. These givers will be connected to Manon on Riot, and she'll act as their delegate for this DAC. And when she finds a campaign to support, the givers that delegated the funds to her will get notified that Manon is sending their donation to a specific campaign. And then those givers will be connected to the people running that campaign. And if they don't like what that campaign is doing, they can actually veto Manon's decision, because she, as the delegate of the DAC, is only stewarding the funds. Ultimately, the original giver maintains complete control of their donation until it is locked in a campaign or milestone to be used for a specific purpose. As Manon's SIP DAC starts to grow and raise funds, more people actually step up as leaders in the community. Manon wants to appoint these leaders as delegates as well. So she implements Aragon's simple multi-delegate governance model to the SIP DAC. Now givers are randomly assigned as delegates for every donation. And if the SIP DAC continues to grow, they can get even crazier, and they can implement a liquid democracy module or some kind of other governance module on top of their campaign, so they can handle more delegates and organize more efficiently. Many interesting projects start creating campaigns and asking for support for creative ideas to help the homeless population in Paris. A few from the SIP community are adamant that the biggest problem with being homeless is the lack of showers. So they want to build an outdoor shower near an abandoned metro station. These guys, we call them makers in the Giveth platform, they make a plan. And they need 1 Ether to get supplies, and that will allow them to take the day off work and build the shower. And then they'll get 0.2 Ether every week to monitor, clean, protect, and maintain these awesome showers. They're also able to expense the propane needed to keep them warm. They create a campaign on Giveth called Shower Time. It's fun. Mano steps up to be a reviewer to keep the guys in check, and with her reputation at stake and her oversight in the mix, Shower Time campaign has no trouble raising. Did I step on something? Okay, cool. Shower Time has no problem raising all the funds they need. They get 4 Ether so they can keep it alive for a few months. The makers do a great job, and many homeless people get to enjoy a fresh, hot shower. Sadly, before the end of the first week, the police come and tear it down. 1 Ether was already collected by the guys to build the shower, and of course they get to keep it. I mean, it's crypto, you can't make them give it back. But the other 3 Ether are actually able to be automatically returned to the givers to support other projects, even though this one failed. Because Mano, as the reviewer, was able to cancel the failed campaign, and the other Ether wasn't just given to people like in Kickstarter and other charities, but it was held in a smart contract. Magic of smart contracts. With other members, Shower Time, despite being short-lived, was actually able to impact some other people's lives. One man named Baptiste was able to take a shower before a job interview, and he felt like it actually got him the job. He became a very active member of the SIP DAC. And in the riot chat room, he is always very adamant that what is needed by people sleeping on the streets is to receive love, attention, and a sense of belonging from normal people in society. With other members in the community, Baptiste forms a group with a plan to go out and talk to the people that are sleeping in the street and ask them as peers, what put them out there? They always go out together in groups of 2, and they always use a video app Giveth integrated into their DAP called SnapProof to make short 20-second videos before and after their adventure, as well as a few short clips during the day when they feel like they made a breakthrough or have something really interesting to document, so they can create this little video story. Everyone that does these videos gets paid a regular day's salary when they go out there through the Giveth DAP in Ether. It starts out as just a small thing, and a few people doing it on the weekends, and then after watching who was successful and who wasn't, Baptiste implements a strict rule, or at least suggests it strongly. No one can buy the people they're working with lunch or give any financial support of any kind. They really have to befriend them on an equal playing field. Then it starts making a noticeable impact. And a lot of people that were in the street are finding safe places to sleep and integrating back into society with this campaign. Samano, who loves the videos and sees this campaign's effectiveness, puts a bunch of Ether into the campaign to incentivize more people to attempt this strategy. Baptiste ends up quitting his job and helping the homeless full-time because of this campaign. And this is where Giveth's magic can really begin to shine, when successes are discovered. Because the good word about Baptiste's project spreads, as obviously Mano's DAC in Paris isn't the only DAC connected with homelessness. In fact, one of the delegates in the European Homelessness Research DAC, which is like an overarching DAC for all of Europe, they ended up being connected with Baptiste when they delegated some funds from a Paris donor to this campaign. And so since they are already connected, it was really easy for them to just message them and ask Baptiste to participate in documenting his campaign so other people can do it more effectively. They get funding to hire a copywriter and put together a handbook, and then that escalates further, and this handbook evolves into a one-day online course that anyone can take. With these supporting structures in place, it becomes a very common campaign in DACs concerned with homelessness all around the world. In fact, this idea actually inspires other DACs with completely different goals to try a similar concept, because everyone can see what's happening if you're in these different groups. So the picking up litter DACs, the teaching kids to code DACs, rescuing feral pets DACs, elderly assistance DACs, all of these groups had quick success with a modification of that strategy. It turns out that paying a fair wage to people working in pairs is very effective and relatively cheap for the results that you get. And because the people on the ground make short videos so that the givers can watch them on SnapProof and other social media platforms, the giver retention is really high. And many people like Baptiste can quit their day jobs to focus on the cause full time. This was a simple idea which was successful in Paris and took off to spread through the DAC community like wildfire, helping altruistic communities tackle various problems around the world. So that's the end of the imagination story. So this is the goal of the Giveth DAP. This is the dream, is to be able to connect all of these people together and collaborate on their goal. And so that when you have this community all in one place, if our platform works as we want it to, they can share resources effectively, and then these ideas that come out of this, the grassroots ideas that come out of permissionless innovation within these communities, can spread virally. The goal is to build communities around causes, and the Giveth community, the Giveth DAC, we're trying to solve problems on the technical level and on the cultural level. On the cultural level, you have a lot of interesting things that happen when money enters communities. And you can see what happened in all the crypto subreddits, right? Our Ethereum was just a magical place, especially in 2016, where money wasn't allowed to be talked about. All the moderators kicked people out. And it was really nice. It was lovey-dovey in those subreddits, especially compared to other cryptos. And we want to do the same thing within the Giveth community. And the DAP's kind of taking that place, where all the financial discussion can happen without having to interrupt the human relations. You see this with Uber and Airbnb as well. When you get an Uber, you just sit down in the cab. You never have to have that interesting discussion about money and how much to pay. And that is kind of the secret sauce of Uber and Airbnb that people don't really talk about. And we want to be that same secret sauce for building communities around causes, where people can chat in the chat rooms without having to jump in their monkey minds and think about all the scarcity that money creates, and and just focus on creating ideas to help the people that they want to help. But unlike Uber and Airbnb, the Giveth DAP never takes a cut. We're run completely on donations. We don't have a profit model. We're just sustained by your guys' love. So thank you. And if you do want to donate, our ENS domain is revolution.eth. So you just type, Nick made that happen, by the way. Thanks, Nick. So if you just type in revolution.eth into MetaMask or MyCrypto or any of those things, it'll just pop up with our address. The other cultural thing that we want to create is, in these digital communities, it's really hard to have a human connection with people. So we want to integrate video as much as possible, so that you can feel more connected to people when you see into their eyes. It's a different level of connection when they're just a handle. It's not as cool, And of course, building that strong web. Whenever we can find a reason to connect a person on social media or put them in a chat room, we just hook them up with all the connections they could ever want. On the technical side, the core of our DAP is liquid pledging. Liquid pledging is invitingly open source. Definitely go check it out. It's a really cool smart contract that allows you to build any type of organization you want. The Giveth DAC is really focused on building products for everyone, right? It's not just for us. So when we try to build something, we over-document, we make it invitingly open source, and we try to build in a more general sense. So while we built it for building DACs, it's actually, you could totally make a normal business with it, with a CEO and COO, and delegate the funds through these channels. Anyway, Jordy gave a great talk at DevCon 3. So if you want to learn more about liquid pledging, you can check it out. And I should say that it's very experimental. In fact, RJ is hacking it right now to make it an Aragon app. So you probably want to wait before you really dive in, but definitely consider it. One of the issues we had with it, though, was that it had really high gas costs. And that moved us to come up with another interesting solution. And this is all about how the Giveth DAC works. If we see a problem that we feel like the rest of the community can benefit from our solving it, then we make it, we try to do it for everybody. We over-document. And so that's how I fell into scaling now, because last week I helped organize a conference with the Web3 Foundation and took up a lot of time. But that's how we do it at Giveth. So we researched our scaling issues, and what we ended up doing was just moving our DAP to Rinkeby in the short term, because we're a blockchain-based entity. We have to pay the people that are working for us. And so it's a little clunky, but we can do we do all the DAP mechanics on Rinkeby and receive donations on the mainnet and send the donations out to the people that earn them through a multi-send. I'll talk about that later. So that's the joys of being a blockchain-based entity. You gotta just do whatever works. The cool thing about doing this kind of thing on a sidechain, though, is that you can do a lot of cool UI testing, and it's relatively beneficial. It's part of that centralization without those centralizing security features. And I think it's important for everyone just to think about doing a lot of testing on these sidechains because the users need to learn how to use your product. Anyway, yeah, we can go to the DAP team. So I should talk about all the people that are making this happen. We have Wojtek, who's leading the DAP team, and this is the real product owner of the magic there. And Sasha and RJ. Sasha's doing all the front-end stuff, and RJ's doing the smart contracts. They have a lot of help from all the random contributors that come in and do user testing and all these other little bug fixes that they can. Grace is the charity insider that gives us a lot of, helps us understand what's going on in the rest of the world outside of the blockchain space. And I should say, Wojtek is the lead, but we actually use Holacracy and Lumio to organize our things. I think we can keep going. Yeah, there we go. And Lumio is a great product. If you guys can, definitely check it out, lumio.org. It's awesome for putting together decisions in a decentralized way. Because in our structure, everyone's a doer. There are no bosses. And so I'm going to have to speed through this, but the governance section, the governance circle is focused on doing the admin work and researching governance and modeling DACs. And that's me, Kai, Jen, and Linz. Linz didn't give us a picture. We basically follow this book called Reinventing Organizations. It's an awesome book. I really recommend anyone who's doing decentralized governance check it out because it will be really influential. There's lots of people doing flat hierarchies, and they have been in the past. Please check that out. Also check out Lumio and Holacracy. Very, very important tools, things that we learned, so hopefully you guys can learn from them too. We build a reward DAO, which gamifies contributions, which is pretty cool. I wish I could talk about it, but there's a Medium post. Basically, we just dish out points, and then people find out how much they're worth later. They have to put all their stuff on the Wall of Fame, which is another project that Edu built, which is really cool. That's how we get everyone to watch their videos. We ran a Burning Man theme camp through our POC DAP, and that was a very successful adventure, a nonprofit temporary event. Also, we did it with the Scaling Now campaign that we just did. And then, oh yeah, we can stay in the comms. The comms, they do all the work around spreading the good news. Oh, by the way, I'm just explaining how we're organized so that if you guys want to come in and you find a place, just dive in, right? So if you're into communications and like social media, this is the place to go. Chris does a great job at stewarding this organization. He's very organized and actually keeps all of Giveth organized by managing all the random projects we're working on. I think that this campaign, more than anything, the circle, exemplifies duocracy because Alan, Yaler, Cleo, Joanna, and Lansky, they all were just random contributors that started working and started doing things, and they started receiving some donations, and then they just became more and more active, and some of them are quitting their jobs and doing stuff with Giveth, so it's pretty cool. And Yaler's crazy. Yaler is why this slideshow is so nuts. He was in Peru and he made this for us, so thanks, Yaler. Hope you guys didn't get too dizzy from all this. But basically, everyone comes in and figures out how to contribute. And social coding is probably the place that a lot of the blockchain world will want to hang out because its goal is to incubate projects that don't have a direct profit model in this space. So Quasia is the steward of this amazing campaign. He's really been killing it lately with so much activity. It's a really fun place to hang out. And he's got his fingers in all the pies. And then we have Jordy, who's working on the 777 standard and all sorts of interesting projects like DAP node with Edu. DAP node is something everyone should check out because a lot of people who are building, not everyone, but all the people that are actually building dApps, if you can just deploy peer-to-peer nodes in a decentralized way, that's kind of the goal. So definitely check out DAP node. Edu also did the Wall of Fame. Oz did snap proof, which is what we were talking about before. Alex is working on the back end and network engineering. Adria is doing auditing all of our code, and he's probably going to work on like POA networks. Adam and Yalda are doing Bright ID, and it's a really cool project that's focusing on just creating uniqueness, like proving that an address is one unique person without all the other overhead that is like, connecting a name to that ID. So, and Yalda might be an alien, I don't know. She's trying to DAOify space. You should check out her talk tomorrow. She's really cool. Bowen Sanders is building an application that's kind of just random that Hudson Jameson built a smart contract for getting married on Ethereum. He got married at the Burning Man camp last year, so he is building a UI for that, which is really cool. Alon's doing PointSpot and actually made this awesome multi-send, so that saves a lot of gas if you're sending a lot of transactions. I'm out of time, so I'm just gonna fly through this. Swarm City hangs out a lot, and they're working on like a Trello-like platform that you can put Ether to cards. It's called Ethcan, really cool for project management. But these are just some of the projects that we have. There's a lot of them out there. If you guys want to help, go to join.giveth.io. I'll keep going all the way to the end. Projects with no profit model should really check out Social Coding's campaign. And altruistic projects of any kind can just come on to Giveth and let's talk about it. I feel like it's a great place to just kind of aggregate a lot of these altruistic projects in one spot. We have shirts and stickers somewhere, so I think Quasia actually has them, so we can hand them out in the hallway. And yeah, if you want to donate, revolution.eth is where we receive all of our funds. And thank you guys so much.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Vanessa Grillet. I'm an executive director at Consensus, where I run the Blockchain for Social Impact activity and the Blockchain for Social Impact Coalition. Today, I'm going to talk about some of the projects in the social impact space and give you some examples. But first, I want to answer maybe 2 or 3 questions. Why blockchain for social impact? What exactly is blockchain for social impact, and how do you affect change? So when Jerome asked me to talk about blockchain for social impact, I wanted to answer the question, why do we speak about blockchain for social impact? Is it something different than the impact that we have every day in our activity? Is it something different than just creating jobs through our the companies that we create, just affecting change through the blockchain? A few months ago, Vitalik posted a few tweets. When the crypto market hit 0.5 trillion, he asked a question that I asked to you guys: have we earned it? How much actual usage of micropayments is there in reality? How much censorship resistant commerce to the common people have we enabled? How many unbanked people have we banked? And how many Venezuelans have we actually been protected from hyperinflation? So this is the question that I ask myself, and maybe you ask yourself. And his answer to all the questions was that we did take action, but maybe that it's not enough. There's a certain level, but maybe it's not enough. So I think what I want to open up to you is, what do we do about it? And before we start the conversation, I just want to lighten up the conversation about a few statistics on the world we live in. not to depress everyone, but 2.7 billion people in the world live on less than 2.50 cents a dollar a day. 1 out of 7 people on the planet do not have an identity. 65 million people are displaced in the world. 1 in every 200 children is a refugee. 40 million people are victims of sex trafficking, forced labor, or forced marriage. 1 out of 7 people are malnourished, and malnutrition causes the death of children under 5, half of the deaths of children under 5 in the world. That's 3.7 million children every year. That's 3.7 million lives too many. Corruption is estimated to be 1.5 trillion each year. That's $1.5 trillion that's directed to assets that should be directed to productive programs, and that is allocated to corrupt programs. That's 2% of the global GDP. And 70% of people who own their land don't actually own their land or have uncertainty on the ownership of their lands. So given that, what should we do? Blockchain and what we do every day is super impactful. It's a radical innovation. It means that we're going to create a new manufacturing or processes to enable this innovation. It's competence destroying. It's going to render the current competence totally obsolete. It's an architectural innovation. It's going to create reorganization of businesses. The promise that I live for, and I hope that you guys live for, is that decentralization, peer-to-peer exchange of value, permissionless systems will allow to accelerate for settlement, lowering of costs of transaction, cutting out rent-taking middlemen, and lowering barriers to access to capital and information. That's what I came here into this industry for. But when we look at social impact, and when we want to affect the people that I mentioned in the other slide, we have to think of the effect of what the technology brings. And as radical as this technology is, we have the choice to go to 2 routes, to do incremental change or to do radical systems change. If we do incremental change and do just enhancing efficiency and transparency of existing systems, we run the risk of using old frameworks and legacy systems. But we have the opportunity to affect the lives of people immediately. If we go through radical change, we allow for new business models to emerge. We allow the opportunity of leapfrogging legacy systems, but it might be a more difficult implementation for a wider scale, and sometimes requires the cooperation with actually the actors which you want to leapfrog. It might be stakeholders or governments. Some examples in the social impact of incremental changes are enhancing transparency in the donation systems, like what Alice is doing, measuring impact, adding layers of payment transparency, lowering fees, remittances. In radical change, thinking about identity, land titles, energy, if you really want to implement those systems at a very, very large scales, it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard in the developed world. It's kind of hard in the developing world. And Sandra Rowe, who is here, will be talking about this later. So if you want to get involved in social impact, and if you want to affect the lives of the people I mentioned in the previous slides, you got to know what you're getting yourself into, and you got to know what you want to do. And you got to know what type of change you want to bring into this world, and how you want to affect that change, and how you want to dedicate your time. Whether you're a technologist, whether you're an investor, whether you're a mentor, whether you're a business person, However, you're involved in the blockchain and the social impact space, you really need to know and come in with your eyes wide open, because it's kind of harder than just building technology. Because intentionality matters. So as you'll see in the examples that I'm going to show, it's important that you know what you're going after. So if you really care about something, if you really care about the environment, if you really care about sex trafficking, if you really care about world hunger, and that's your goal, and you want to solve this issue, you know, create the new business and the solution that that solves for that. Understand the problems on the ground and work with the people on the ground. This is a human-centered design approach. This is not just about technology. This is working with people on the ground. There are so many constraints. People are so surprised working on these projects, how long it takes, what difficulties on the ground are just implementing those projects. Working with people on the ground, partnering with people who know what's going on, and just getting information from other people, lowering the cost of access to the technology, and collaborating with anyone that wants to work on the same projects is really key. And measuring your impact is really also important to continue to know what your goal is. You know, if your goal is decarbonization, measure as much as you can and as precisely as you can what you're going for. If your goal is alleviating poverty, measure how many families you've affected and try to be as precise as possible. The blockchain actually allows you to have enhanced tools for that. So now, what is blockchain for social impact? We created at Consensus and with other charities and NGOs something called the Blockchain for Social Impact Coalition. And we asked, when we created this coalition, you know, what are the main areas in which you guys are working on, and which areas, which sectors do you think are the key sectors which have the most impact in the social impact sectors? And 4 sectors came up. The first one was identity and vulnerable populations. Second one was financial inclusion. The fourth one was supply chain. And the fourth one, energy and environment. So identity and vulnerable population is really the cornerstone, I would say, of everything in blockchain, and especially in blockchain for social impact. As we've seen, there are so many 1 billion people, don't have identity in this world. And this is something that, you know, governments don't acknowledge their existence. They don't have access to assets, to bank accounts. They don't have access to rights. So it's just living in another world. And so granting a sovereign identity to these populations allows them to really get access to education, property rights, bank accounts, etc. Financial inclusion also piggybacks back on identity, and there's a lot of application regarding remittances, crowdfunding, and I don't like to use the idea of banking the unbanked, but really the idea of creating new systems for the unbanked. Because why would the unbanked want to use the legacy systems which excluded them, right? Then we have the supply chain. So there's a lot of companies who are really looking deeply into the supply chain applications, especially to have a clear and transparent supply chain in order to track provenance and ethical production, and also with the hope that human trafficking and human rights abuses will be tracked on the supply chain, or will be able to be avoided. It's going to be very hard to do it on the ground, and I'll go into the details of that later in my presentation. Then we have energy and environment, with a lot of off-grid energy trading and peer-to-peer trading. After we identified these 4 areas, a lot of other areas, which I think are really exciting, popped up with a lot of projects. Those concerned more human rights activists, democracy, philanthropy, and equal justice. And I think those areas are really ripe for disruption. And I think maybe they're also a little bit my passion. So in terms of human rights activists, a lot of the projects are not public yet, but because of issues around security of some of the human rights activists themselves, but their needs are around security, their personal security, the security of the information that they carry, their freedom of speech, how they're going to, transmit the information in order to carry out their message, secure their funding when they're traveling, and secure their location. In terms of democracy, in the Western world, we have 200 years old democracies. In other areas of the world, we have other forms of government. I would say that none of them have been touched either by the internet, really, or the revolution of blockchain yet. And I think that's coming. I think right now we see applications around voting, around fake news, around movement building, liquid democracy, but it's not yet matured to really a deep, challenging, I would say, we haven't reached the moment where we're challenging the fundamentals of our democracies and our systems. So we're still in the incremental changes of what we're trying to do on the democracy side. We're trying to make the voting better. We're trying to make the representation better. But we're not challenging what representation is. In terms of philanthropy, there's increased transparency, donations in crypto. So here again, more an incremental change rather than systems change, because we're not rethinking about why we're giving, how we're giving, but we're trying to give in a better way, which is perfectly fine in my view. Equal justice, that is also something that is a little bit untouched, but I think we'll see more of it. The criminal justice system in the US and in international justice system can be enhanced through the blockchain. Evidence-based and due process of law is ripe also for disruption, and I think those areas we will see more and more applications of. Any questions until now? No? All right, so I'll go quickly into the actual applications. And so a little disclaimer. I have a few examples. I'm not endorsing any examples. I think they're interesting examples. Some are not even on the Ethereum blockchain, but I think for the purpose of social impact, they're really interesting examples. I think some are still raising money. I'm not endorsing that either, but I think they're just really interesting use cases. So identity and vulnerable population. The first use case is Moldova and vulnerable population. Moldova has an issue with the trafficking of children, and they are trying to solve that issue because children are exported out of Moldova into brothels and turned into prostitutes outside of Moldova. And what they're trying to do is give these children a digital identity based on biometric data. And they're trying to combine it with an enhanced monitoring of the borders and an alert system for the missing children. So they're hoping that the children, once they cross the border with a digital identity based on the blockchain, won't be able to actually cross the border and be trafficked outside of Moldova. So we'll see how that project unfolds, but it's supported by the UN and a lot of other countries who really want to take action on the situation. Another interesting project is Blockchain for Change to connect the homeless. They partner with Life Wireless, who provided 3,000 telephones to people on the streets. And these telephones had an app who had 3 components: a digital ID called Change Pass, a smart wallet, and a marketplace. And this marketplace gave them access to all the rights that they actually already had access to, but really couldn't connect to. And you know, when you're homeless and you don't have your telephone, you don't have any connections, you know, you have all these rights, but you don't really, you know, go out for them. And the idea here is that you provide them with the identity, you provide them with the connectivity with the telephone, and they'll be able to exercise their rights. So it's still in, they're still trying to see how that works. But I thought it was interesting because one of the major challenge, of course, in all these projects is the connectivity, is the access to the smartphones, especially whether it's in developed countries or developing countries. It's really the connectivity which is an issue. So on the energy side, there's a lot going on, and some of the projects are not usually tagged impact, so it's harder to navigate. So you know, you really have to pick and choose what you think has an impact for you, or what you think is interesting. So we have Grid Plus, which is a peer-to-peer trading market for electricity. Carbon X, who's going to try to do carbon offsets for individuals. And then We Power, which I thought was interesting because it takes a different approach by allowing green energy developers to raise capital and selling future energy production upfront, and then create a transparent green energy accounting for distributed open ledger. And in that category, there's a lot of coalitions. The UN just created the UN Climate Change Coalition. There's the Climate Ledger Initiative, the Energy Web Foundation. There's a lot of interesting hackathons in that space, and a lot of solutions that are based on crypto economics and are trying to incentivize actors to take action and to find market-based solutions. So I think that's one area that's gonna be really developing in the future. The supply chain. So supply chain is something that all the companies are tackling, not only for social impact, but a few examples here. Sustainable fisheries. People want to see the provenance of the fish and see how where the fish is coming from, that it's been sustainably fished. So that Viant is one of the consensus spokes that provides this provenance verification. We also have some solutions that provide the same thing for counterfeit pills. But the question is, how does the supply chain solution provide a radical solution for issues such as labor, slavery, and corruption? So in the garment industry, the minerals, usually, if you tag the mineral that you track, probably the slavery or the forced labor will come either before just at the extraction point, and it's going to be very hard to see through the blockchain, and it's not going to show. Or there will be acts of corruption, or what happens if you're in a country with prevalence of conflict, and the input is done under duress or under the act of corruption. It's going to be very hard. So yes, the supply chain is a great tool. It's going to be a hard tool to maneuver to actually guarantee, I would say, that there's no forced labor or there's no act of corruption in the supply chain. So I just want to be very careful with presenting the supply chain solution for blockchain as a silver bullet for these issues. So I'll pass on this. Human rights and democracy. So we have, I have 4 examples. As you see, it's my favorite subject. We have Civil, which is sustainable journalism. It's a decentralized marketplace for sustainable journalism, where people are incentivized to vet creators, and there's a special governance structure for the journalists. ORCID, I don't know if everyone is familiar with ORCID, but it's really a surveillance-free access to the internet, where people can buy bandwidth and exchange bandwidth on a peer-to-peer transaction, so that you don't have to, you can't have access to the internet without having it being surveillanced upon you. Then we have organizations like Democracy Earth, who tried to create new governance tools and had an interesting experience with the Colombian peace treaty, whereby the expats who in Colombia were not allowed to vote on the peace treaty, and they set up a digital process to allow them to at least give their opinion on that. And so they were able to do a blockchain verification of their opinion, and so it wasn't a vote, but it had some value and it had influence. And so we see these new movement buildings and these new forms of semi-democracy, which are interesting, I think. And Votes is a mobile election voting platform, and it just raised quite a lot of money, and it's designed really to make it easier for disenfranchised voters to participate. All these voting platforms and all these solutions have one purpose, is to change the system that is not working, and that is disempowering the less advantaged people in the system. And that's why, you know, we're all not sleeping at night, is because all the systems that are in place right now are creating so many inequalities that we have to find solutions to change that. On the financial inclusion, of course, I'll present a musico, unbanking the banked. And BitPesa. These two solutions have the potential to reduce the cost of transactions and remittances. So again, these are incremental changes and do not, I would say, address fundamentally the issues of financial inclusions, but I think there are good solutions. Financial inclusion is a hard nut to crack, and I struggle to give you a really good example in the financial inclusion where I found a very original business model that is completely different and thinks completely out of the box on how to reach the last mile, because all these solutions still addresses people who have certain access to certain either bank accounts or a certain civil society, and it doesn't reach the last mile. So time's up. Do you have any questions?
Just you presented a lot of things. Do you have anything concerning the equality between men and women?
I don't.
And do you have any idea of something that could go in this way on the blockchain that could help reduce the...
So I'll give you one statistic. So in the world of rural farming and agriculture, about 50 to 60% are actually women. And these are single shareholder farmers, which ultimately mean that if you give more money into their pockets, they end up having, they end up feeding their families, and then in turn, you've seen the statistics from Green Foundation and other institutions, which show that if you actually give women in those kind of agricultural rural regions more money, communities overall tend to do better. So that's one place where if you can make a direct impact in the which I'll be talking about in 2 minutes, then you can really help lift the entire community.
Okay.
So I don't have an answer, but it's a great question, and we'll be thinking about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Just a question, do you have anything ongoing or collaboration about organ trafficking?
No, not in our...
Okay, so
no.
we will talk.
Hey, thanks for the comment that blockchain tech isn't necessarily a silver bullet and there's a much wider consideration needed for some of these issues. How much work do you actually do on the ground versus just building nice UI?
So we work with a lot of institutions on the ground, some of which we can't disclose, but most of the clients we work with are in developed countries. So we have we deal with direct issues on the ground.
Hi, thinking about this, I'm really interested about the identity thing, and I was talking today with a friend that she works for refugees crisis, and we were kind of wondering how are we gonna, like, it's really a good thing to use identity to help refugees to keep their identity and to also to prevent, for example, the case of the kids in Moldova. But we were wondering how are we going to do to avoid governments to stop refugees moving around, like we see many countries in Europe now trying to avoid refugees coming here. So how do you think that it's possible to not turn this tool against the refugees?
Yeah, it's a risk, and it's a risk that we see also in Moldova. In terms of moving refugees, for example, in Europe, it would need a concerted effort for people to recognize a blockchain-based identity. What we're looking at is more sovereign-based identity, and not working directly with governments, but working with NGOs. So, for example, if we work with the World Food Programme, it's working with the UN and their recognition of the refugees and the way they recognize and they identify the